Welcome to Deep Dive. This is the show where we take a whole stack of sources, could be articles, research, notes we've gathered, and we really try to pull out the core insights, the stuff you need to know. Think of it as like your shortcut to getting up to speed on something interesting. We aim for surprising facts, maybe a little bit of humor, just enough to keep you listening. Today, we are stepping into a pretty shattery world, definitely a terrifying one. It's the reality behind one of the biggest horror franchises ever, the Conjuring Universe. Now, you've probably seen the movies. I mean, who hasn't? You've jumped at the scares, maybe screamed a little at the ghosts popping up, and maybe you laughed, nervously once the credits rolled and the lights were back on. They're really well-made films designed for that thrill, that sense of dread. But what if I told you, and this is what we're digging into, what if the real stories, the ones that inspired these blockbusters, what if they're actually even darker, maybe more unsettling because, well, they happened. So that's the mission for today. We're going to peel back those layers of Hollywood fiction, try and uncover the chilling truths behind these stories. It's a deep dive into the actual cases that fired up this whole universe. We're looking for those moments that make you go, aha, or maybe, oh no, we're reality. And well, the supernatural seem to blur in some really scary ways. Okay, let's unpack this. And we have to start with the foundation, right? These real cases and the two very, very unique people behind them.
Yeah, that's absolutely the place to start. Because the movies, they're huge, they're compelling entertainment, no doubt. But they really are just a gateway, aren't they? A gateway to something much deeper, much more complex, and often, frankly, without those neat Hollywood endings.
The foundation you're talking about, it has to be Ed and Lorraine Warren. They are the absolute pivotal figures here. Their real-life work, their paranormal investigations over decades literally became the blueprint for The Conjuring, for Annabelle, for all of it.
Hmm.
And their work spanned, what, from the 50s right through into the 2000s. They shaped how a whole generation thought about ghosts and demons.
Totally. Ed Warren, he called himself a self-taught demonologist, which is quite a title. And Lorraine, his wife, she was known as this gifted clairvoyant medium. They were basically paranormal investigators before that was even really a mainstream thing, certainly before reality TV. And their work wasn't just passive observation, right? They were actively involved, confronting things. They documented, get this, over 10,000 cases. 10,000, just let that number sink in for a moment.
It's staggering. It really is a lifetime of dealing with the unexplained. And we only really hear about a handful of them, the big ones, the ones that made the movies. But even that small fraction, those famous cases, they are more than enough to haunt your dreams. They stick around in our minds precisely because they're so disturbing, so hard to shake off.
Precisely. And it's important to understand their specific roles, how they work together. Ed, the demonologist, he wasn't just looking for, like, misty apparitions. His focus was very specific, rooted in this theological view of evil. He believed in demons, fallen angels, a whole hierarchy. So his work often involved what he saw as spiritual warfare, using religious rites, blessings, sometimes working towards exorcism. He saw himself as fighting back, protecting people.
Right, actively engaging.
Exactly. And Lorraine complemented that perfectly. She brought the intuitive side, psychic element. As a clairvoyant, she could often perceive things others couldn't, the history of a place, the nature of the entity involved, residual energies. She'd get these feelings, these visions that provided crucial context. It wasn't just about seeing ghosts. It was about understanding the why and the what. So together, it was this unique blend of investigation, psychic insight, and religious intervention, often leading to exorcism attempts, which were incredibly draining for everyone involved.
And the cases they did publicize, wow, they are legendary in paranormal circles. Let's start with the one that kicked off the whole movie franchise, The Conjuring, back in 2013. It focused on the Perron family. For a lot of people, this movie really set the gold standard for based on a true story horror. So the year is 1971. Roger and Carolyn Perron, they have 5 daughters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April. Quite a big family. They move into this old farmhouse. It's on a huge plot of land, like 200 acres, in Harrisville, Rhode Island. You can picture it, right? Old house, lots of land out in the country, should be idyllic, the perfect place to raise kids.
The American dream, almost.
Exactly. They're hoping for peace, quiet, a fresh start, the whole thing. But what they found waiting for them inside that house, well, it was anything but peaceful. It was, as the original account says, just pure terror. And it didn't take long to start.
No, it really didn't. And like a lot of these cases, it probably started small. Weird smells, cold spots, maybe an object moves slightly, things you might try to rationalize away at first.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just an old house settling, or the kids are playing tricks.
Right. Easy to dismiss initially.
But then it ramped up
Yeah.
quickly and relentlessly.
Yeah.
the family started experiencing this whole catalog of terrifying phenomena. It wasn't subtle anymore. We're talking about seeing actual apparitions, not just shadows, but distinct figures seen by multiple family members. Disembodied voices calling out names, whispering threats in the dead of night. Furniture moving on its own, sometimes just sliding, other times apparently being thrown violently across rooms. And these awful choking sensations, especially affecting Carolyn, the mother, feeling like invisible hands were gripping her throat. It sounds absolutely harrowing.
It really does. And they didn't just feel some vague presence. They believed they knew who or what was tormenting them. A specific ghost they named Bathsheba Sherman. And the backstory they uncovered, or the local legend, I guess, associated with Bathsheba, is incredibly chilling. Adds this whole historical nastiness to it.
The legend was that she lived in the 19th century, was accused of witchcraft, or maybe Satanism. The most disturbing part of the story is that she supposedly sacrificed her own infant child to the devil. Just horrific.
Yeah. And then, the story goes, she cursed the land the farmhouse stood on before she went out and hanged herself from a tree near the pond on the property.
So it wasn't just a haunted house. It felt like the land itself was tainted, cursed by this malevolent historical figure, almost like she was claiming the house and anyone in it.
This specific dark history is probably what really caught the Warrens' attention, you think?
Almost certainly. By the time the Perrons called the Warrens, they were desperate, absolutely at the end of their rope. Their lives were chaos. They feared for their safety, especially the kids. The youngest daughter, April, was apparently talking to an unseen friend.
Oh, creepy.
Yeah. So Lorraine especially got involved. She did research, dug into the local history, found the Bathsheba legends, and then came a really pivotal moment, one the movie depicts quite dramatically. Lorraine decided to conduct a seance in the house, trying to confront this entity directly, which, is always a risky move in these situations.
And risky it was. The accounts of what happened during that seance are just deeply disturbing.
Yeah.
It highlights the danger the Warrens were willing to step into. During the ritual, Carolyn Perron, the mother, reportedly started to levitate, to actually rise off the floor.
Can you imagine?
No, and she started speaking in tongues. Her voice changed completely, becoming this guttural, inhuman sound.
Witnessing that happen to your own mother, the daughters have spoken about the trauma. Seeing her contorted, maybe thrown across the room, speaking this voice.
It must have been absolutely terrifying. So much so that the family, even though they called the Warrens for help, they actually begged them to stop, to leave.
Right. The intensity unleashed during that seance was just too much, even more terrifying, apparently, than the haunting itself up to that point. They wanted them out.
So the Warrens left.
They did, at the family's insistence, which leads us to a really important difference between the movie and what the family says happened.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that.
Well, the movie, you know how Hollywood works? It needs that resolution. So, The Conjuring ends with the haunting seemingly resolved. The family's safe, evil is vanquished, roll credits.
Feels good, right? Cathartic.
Exactly. But the real-life story, much less comforting. The parents themselves, particularly Andrea Perron, who read books about it, insist the haunting didn't stop when the Warrens left. They say they continued to experience paranormal activity, maybe less intense, but still present for years, until they finally saved up enough money and found the courage to move out of the farmhouse in 1980, nearly a decade later.
Wow. 9 years.
Yeah. So what's fascinating and kind of chilling is how the movie simplifies things for closure. But real life, especially with these kinds of experiences, is often messy, unresolved. It really makes you question what closure even means when dealing with something so inexplicable. Does the haunting just fade, or does it follow you?
That lack of a neat ending, that's almost scarier, isn't it? The idea that some things just don't get resolved. You just endure them and then maybe escape them physically, but
Dude,
the memory.
It leaves scars, absolutely.
And speaking of things that leave scars and defy neat endings, let's talk about an object. Something that started innocent but became this icon of cinematic and real-life horror. Annabelle.
Yeah?
You mentioned horror dolls. People think Chucky maybe. But Annabelle, she's real. And honestly, arguably far more disturbing because of it.
Oh, absolutely. The whole creepy doll trope hits different when it's based on fact. The idea of something meant for comfort, for childhood innocence, becoming a vessel for something evil. It's fundamentally unsettling. Annabelle's story starts pretty innocuously back in 1970. A student nurse, Donna, gets a Raggedy Ann doll as a birthday present from her mom.
Just a regular Raggedy Ann, not the porcelain horror show from the movie.
Right, exactly. Just a normal cloth Raggedy Ann doll. Something sweet, nostalgic maybe for her apartment she shared with her roommate, Angie. Nothing sinister about it at first glance.
Okay. So a harmless gift, how does it go from that to, well, Annabelle?
It started subtly, then escalated, just like the Perron case almost. First, the doll would just move. Donna and Angie would leave it on the couch, come back later, and find it sitting in a chair in another room.
Yeah.
Or maybe propped up against a door.
Okay, creepy. But maybe someone's playing a prank? Or they just forgot where they left it.
Possible.
Yeah.
But then came the notes. They started finding these messages, scrawled on pieces of parchment paper. Things like, help us or help Lou. Lou was a friend of theirs.
Parchment paper. Did they even own parchment paper?
That's the really weird detail. No, they didn't. The paper itself just seemed to appear along with the messages. That's much harder to rationalize away. It suggests something else was going on.
Yeah, that's beyond just forgetting things. Okay, notes are creepy. Then what?
Then it got visual
Hmm.
and messy. One time, they found the doll with this red, blood-like substance on its hands and down its chest.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's not subtle.
Not at all. That really shifted things. And their friend, Lou, the one mentioned in the notes,
Yeah.
he hated the doll from the start, felt something was wrong with it. He apparently had a terrifying experience, woke up paralyzed, saw the doll standing over him, felt it choking him. Then he claimed it physically attacked him, leaving scratches on his chest.
Okay, so physical attacks now, too. That's terrifying. This is when they called someone.
Yes, Donna was, understandably, freaked out. She contacted a priest, who then put her in touch with the Warrens.
And the Warrens came in, investigated. What was their take?
They didn't mess around. They concluded the doll was definitely possessed. But, and this is a key part of their methodology, not by a human spirit or a ghost, they believed it was inhabited by a non-human demonic entity.
A demon. Not the ghost of a little girl, because didn't they initially think it was a girl named Annabelle Higgins?
They did, or rather, a medium they consulted initially told them that. She said it was the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins who had died on the property years ago, and she just wanted to be loved.
Okay, so a sad ghost story.
That's what the entity wanted them to think. According to the Warrens, this was a classic demonic deception tactic. Pretend to be something harmless, something pitiable, like a child's spirit, to gain sympathy, gain permission to stay, essentially.
Like an invitation.
Exactly. The Warrens believed its true nature was malevolent, and it was using the doll as a conduit, aiming eventually to possess one of the humans, Donna or Angie.
Wow. So the Warrens saw it as much more dangerous than just a haunted doll?
Far more dangerous, which is why they took it with them. They performed an exorcism right on the apartment and then took the doll for containment?
Containment.
Really?
Which leads to the occult museum.
Precisely. Annabelle is now famously housed in their museum, sealed inside a specially built glass and wood case. It's got warnings all over it, a crucifix nearby. It's not just on display like a regular museum piece. The Warrens considered it active containment, trying to bind whatever entity is attached to it.
And the famous warning, do not touch.
Absolutely. They were adamant about that. Don't open the case, don't taunt it, don't even lean on the glass.
Yeah.
They believed provoking it could have serious consequences.
Which brings us to that story. The anecdote about the guy who ignored the warning. Here's where it gets really interesting and frankly kind of terrifyingly confirms their fears, maybe?
It's certainly a chilling story, whether you take it as literal proof or a cautionary tale. The account goes that a young man visited the museum on a motorcycle with his girlfriend. Apparently, he was very dismissive, mocking the Annabelle doll, tapping on the glass, daring it to do something to him. You know, you're just a doll, that kind of thing.
Oh, boy.
Bad idea.
According to the story, Ed Warren warned him, told him to leave it alone. The guy laughed it off. They left the museum on his motorcycle. Within hours, he reportedly lost control of his motorcycle, crashed into a tree, and was killed instantly. His girlfriend survived, but was hospitalized for over a year.
Wow. Just wow. Like you said, correlation isn't causation, but the timing, the specific provocation. It's incredibly disturbing. Makes you really question the boundaries of, well, whatever that doll represents.
It definitely reinforces the narrative of caution surrounding these objects. It suggests that disbelief or mockery might not be the protection some think it is.
Yeah. Don't poke the potentially demonic bear or doll. Okay, so from a contained object in the U.S., let's hop across the pond. England, 1977. The Enfield Poltergeist. This was the basis for the Conjuring 2.
Yes, Enfield. This case is huge, hugely documented, hugely debated. It absolutely gripped the UK and then the world, really polarized the paranormal community.
Right. This wasn't just a family story. It became a media sensation. So set the scene for us. London, 1977.
We're in Enfield, North London.
a council house, so like public housing. Peggy Hodgson, a single mother, is living there with her 4 kids, Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy.
And the focus really zeroes in on one of the daughters, right?
Yes, particularly 11-year-old Janet. She seemed to be at the epicenter of most of the really intense activity, though her oldest sister Margaret was also affected.
And what kind of activity are we talking about? How did it start?
It started pretty abruptly in August 1977. Things like beds shaking violently, drawers flying open, then it escalated, much like the other cases. Furniture moving on its own became common, chairs sliding, tables overturning. There were loud, percussive knocking sounds coming from inside the walls, sometimes seeming to respond to questions.
Responding, like intelligent communication.
That's what some investigators believed,
Yeah.
yeah. Like 1 knock for no, 3 for yes. And then there were marbles and Lego bricks apparently materializing out of thin air and being thrown. Cold spots, sudden fires breaking out.
Wow, a whole range of classic poltergeist phenomena, but really intense.
Extremely intense.
It is.
But the most disturbing parts involved Janet herself. She was witnessed levitating on several occasions, just rising off her bed or the floor.
Levitating? Seriously? Were there pictures?
There are famous photos, yes, taken by newspaper photographers and investigators. They show Janet seemingly midair, sometimes looking terrified, sometimes almost contorted. These images are a huge part of why the case became so famous and debated.
I can imagine. Photos make it seem so much more real. And then there was the voice, right?
Oh, yes, the voice. This was perhaps the most chilling aspect. Janet would lapse into this deep, rough, guttural voice, completely unlike her own. And this voice claimed to be someone else,
Ooh.
an old man named Bill Wilkins. He claimed he had lived in the house before the Hodgsons and had died there specifically. He said he'd had a hemorrhage and died in a chair downstairs.
And was that true? Did a Bill Wilkins die there?
Astonishingly, yes. Investigations later confirmed that a man named Bill Wilkins had indeed lived and died in the house, reportedly in the manner the voice described. That lent huge credibility to the claims for many people. The voice also used incredibly foul language, which was shocking coming from an 11-year-old girl.
Okay, that's undeniably creepy. The photos, the voice, the confirmed details. But wasn't there a lot of skepticism, too? People saying it was a hoax?
Oh, absolutely. Enormous skepticism. It became known as Britain's Amityville, partly because of the media circus and the intense debate. Skeptics pointed out that Janet was caught faking things on a couple of occasions, like bending spoons or hiding a tape recorder. She even admitted to it later, saying they did it maybe 2% of the time, just to see if the investigators would notice, especially when phenomena weren't happening.
Ah, so that admission really fueled the doubters.
It certainly did. Many argued the whole thing was elaborate trickery by clever, attention-seeking children, maybe encouraged by their mother, or perhaps a result of mass hysteria within the family. The Society for Psychical Research investigators themselves were divided at times.
So where did the Warrens fit into Enfield? They investigated too, right? As shown in the movie.
They did visit the house, yes, in 1978, though maybe not for as long or as centrally as the movie depicts. The main investigators were Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair from the SBR, who spent months there. But the Warrens were involved, and they were firmly convinced it was genuine demonic activity, not just a poltergeist or a hoax. Lorraine claimed to have felt a powerful, dark presence.
So they weren't the only ones who believed it was real, despite the hoax accusations.
No, definitely not. Gross and Playfair, despite acknowledging some possible trickery, remained largely convinced that something genuinely paranormal and unexplained was occurring. The sheer volume and nature of the phenomena witnessed by multiple independent people, including police officers who filed reports about moving furniture, were hard to dismiss entirely.
So it really did divide the paranormal world. Believers pointed to the evidence, the voice, the levitation photos. Skeptics pointing to the trickery, admissions, and lack of definitive proof.
Exactly. It remains one of the most contested cases ever. But setting aside the debate about what caused it for the Hodgson family themselves, what they went through was absolutely real to them. The fear, the disruption, the media intrusion. It was incredibly traumatic. Whether it was demons or disturbed psychology or something else, it left deep scars on their lives. They talked about it for years afterwards.
Yeah, you can't discount the human impact, regardless of the explanation.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, Enfield is just such a powerful example of that blurry line. Belief versus skepticism when you're faced with things you just can't easily explain. It shows how these experiences, whatever their source, profoundly shape people's lives. Their sense of reality, that lasting impact, is undeniable.
And that impact, that blurring of lines, sometimes spills out of the home and into the public sphere in the most unexpected ways, like a courtroom. Which brings us to maybe the most legally shocking case connected to the Warrens. Cheyenne Johnson, the inspiration for The Conjuring. The devil made me do it.
Ah, the devil made me do it case. Yes, this one was truly unprecedented in the American legal system. A genuine landmark, for all the wrong reasons perhaps. It marked the very first time in U.S. history that a defense lawyer formally tried to argue demonic possession as the reason for their client's actions in a murder trial.
Just think about that, standing up in court and saying, my client didn't do it, the devil did. It sounds almost like something from a medieval trial, not 1981 Connecticut.
The prosecution certainly thought so. They basically called it ridiculous and tried to shut it down immediately. It challenges the whole basis of law, intent, responsibility.
Okay, so what was the crime? What did Arnie Johnson actually do?
On February 16, 1981, Arnie Shine Johnson, who was 19 at the time, got into a heated argument with his landlord, Alan Bono, in Brookfield, Connecticut. During the argument, Johnson stabbed Bono repeatedly with a pocket knife. Bono died from his injuries. There was no question that Johnson committed the stabbing. Witnesses saw it. He was arrested at the scene.
So seemingly an open and shut case of murder or manslaughter. Where does the demonic possession claim come in?
It comes from events that happened months before the murder. And again, the Warrens are central to this backstory. They had been called in to help the family of Arnie Johnson's fiancée, Debbie Glatzel. Specifically, her 11-year-old brother, David Glatzel.
Another child.
Yes. David was reportedly experiencing terrifying symptoms starting in mid-1980. Violent convulsions, speaking in strange voices, having visions of a demonic figure. He described it as an old man with beastly features, big black eyes, horns.
Sounds horrific for a child.
Absolutely. The family reported objects moving, strange noises, scratches appearing on David's body. They were devout Catholics and became convinced he was possessed.
So they called the Warrens.
They did. And the Warrens agreed with the possession diagnosis. They spent weeks with the Glatzel family documenting the phenomena and eventually assisting the Catholic Church in performing several exorcisms on young David. Ed Warren described it as one of the most intense and dangerous cases they ever handled.
Okay, so David is supposedly possessed. How does Arnie Johnson get involved, leading to the murder months later?
Arn was present during many of these exorcism rituals for David. He was engaged to Debbie, David's older sister, and was very concerned about the boy. According to the Warrens and the family's testimony, during one particularly violent exorcism rite, Arn allegedly challenged the demon possessing David. He supposedly taunted it, yelling at it to leave the boy alone and enter him instead.
Oh, wow. Like offering himself up.
That was the claim. The Warrens asserted that at that moment, the demonic entity, or one of the entities they believed was afflicting David, left the boy and transferred into Arnie Johnson.
So the defense argument was Arn was possessed because he tried to save David during the exorcism.
Exactly. His lawyer, Martin Minella, argued that when Arn stabbed Alan Bono months later, he wasn't acting of his own free will. He was under the influence or direct control of the demon that had entered him during the exorcism.
Therefore, not guilty by reason of demonic possession.
That was the plea. It wasn't insanity. It was specifically demonic possession overriding his volition. A truly unique and controversial defense strategy.
How did the court handle that? I mean, you can't exactly put a demon on the witness stand.
No, you can't. And the judge, Robert Callahan, ultimately refused to allow the demonic possession defense to proceed. He essentially ruled that such a defense was impossible to prove scientifically or legally. There's no objective standard, no evidence you can present in court to validate demonic possession. So he barred any testimony related to it.
So the devil made me do it, defense failed legally. What happened to Arnie Johnson then?
Even though the possession defense was thrown out, the outcome was still somewhat surprising. Johnson was ultimately convicted, but not of murder. He was found guilty of first-degree manslaughter.
Manslaughter, not murder. That's a big difference.
It is. And he received a sentence of 10 to 20 years, but ended up serving only about 5 years.
5 years for killing someone. That seems lenient. Do you think the whole possession story maybe influenced the jury or the sentencing, even if it wasn't allowed as a formal defense?
It's impossible to say for sure, but it's certainly a question many people have asked. Did the sheer strangeness of the preceding events, the exorcisms, the Warrens' involvement, create enough doubt or sympathy to lead to a lesser charge or sentence? We'll likely never know.
But the legacy of the case is undeniable. It really forced this clash between ancient beliefs and the modern legal system.
Absolutely. It gave birth to one of the most controversial and, chilling cases in paranormal history precisely because it dragged these questions of evil, free will, and responsibility out of theology and into a court of law.
So what does this all mean? When something so inexplicable, so potentially supernatural, enters a place like a courtroom, it just throws everything into chaos, doesn't it?
It really does. It challenges our entire system of justice, which is built on understanding human motive and agency. How do you account for something else?
And this case, maybe more than any other Warren case, really forces you to sit with that uncomfortable overlap. Where does human responsibility end and, well, something else begin? If it begins at all. It's a debate that still goes on.
It pushes all the boundaries. And speaking of places that push boundaries and seem to contain the echoes of these dark cases, we have to talk about the Warrens Occult Museum. It's not just a footnote. It's almost like the physical manifestation of their life's work and maybe its lingering darkness.
Right. The museum wasn't some separate building downtown. It was literally in their house in Monroe, Connecticut. Their home doubled as this repository for, well, cursed stuff.
Exactly. More than just a home office. They dedicated a specific area, essentially a locked-off room or basement area, to house the objects they collected from their investigations.
And we're not talking souvenirs here. We're talking items they believed were actively dangerous, cursed, haunted, or used in dark rituals. Hundreds, maybe thousands of items over the years.
A room just filled with this concentrated history of negativity. Haunted artifacts, cursed objects, things linked to demonic infestations, and of course, pride of place in her own sealed case, Annabelle.
Just having Annabelle there makes it intense. But what about other visitors? What do people report experiencing when they went through the museum? It wasn't open to the public casually, right?
No, not usually. It was more by appointment or for specific groups, often with a blessing before entry. And the experiences reported are pretty consistent and unsettling. Many people describe this heavy, almost suffocating energy inside. A palpable sense of dread or unease that hits them as soon as they enter the space.
Like the air is thick with something.
That's a common description. And it's not just feelings. People report technical glitches, cameras malfunctioning, brand new batteries suddenly dying, audio recorders picking up strange noises, or nothing at all.
Devices just freaking out.
Yeah. And physical reactions, too. It's not uncommon for visitors to report feeling suddenly nauseous, dizzy, or overwhelmed with sadness or fear. Some even faint. The Warrens themselves, and now their son-in-law, Tony Sparrow, who curates it, always treated the place with extreme caution.
And amongst all those creepy items, besides Annabelle, was there anything else considered particularly potent?
There were many, but one that often gets mentioned is a satanic idol. A dark, grotesque-looking statue.
Where did that come from?
The story is that it was recovered, or maybe stolen, from the woods after being used in some kind of dark ritual or satanic ceremony.
Okay, creepy origin. What's special about it?
According to the Warrens and some visitors, this idol has a specific, unnerving characteristic. It supposedly never stopped vibrating. Not literally shaking, maybe, but emitting this constant, palpable wave of malevolence, like you could feel the bad energy just rolling off it, a constant hum of negativity that made people deeply uncomfortable being near it.
Never stopped vibrating with malevolence. That's quite a description.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it raises that question, doesn't it? What is the Occult Museum? Is it just a fascinating, maybe morbid collection of artifacts from unusual cases, a private archive?
Or is it something more?
Or does it actually, as the experiences suggest, concentrate this dark energy? Does collecting all these objects linked to negative events create some kind of focal point, a beacon almost?
A portal to darkness, as the outline suggested.
Perhaps. Does it reflect the essence of the cases, or does it amplify it? It makes you wonder if malevolence can be contained, but still active. Still radiating outwards.
Yeah.
A deeply unsettling thought.
Yeah, the idea of storing evil in your basement.
Okay, so as we kind of pull all these threads together, the Perrons, Annabelle, Enfield, Arnie Johnson, the museum, we land back at that big, unavoidable question that always swirls around the Warrens. What was real? What might have been, embellished, maybe exaggerated for effect, or through belief itself? It's the core debate.
It really is, and there are strong arguments on both sides, which is why it remains so compelling. On one hand, you have the skeptics. They argue the Warrens were perhaps overly enthusiastic believers who interpreted ambiguous events through a very specific demonic lens. Or maybe they sensationalized cases for fame, for books, for lectures.
The financial motive argument. Right. Skeptics point to inconsistencies in accounts over time. The lack of hard, repeatable scientific evidence that would satisfy a lab coat, basically. They highlight how suggestion and psychological factors play huge roles in these intense situations. And they point to cases like Enfield, where some fakery was admitted. It's a valid critique. Extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence.
Absolutely. Got to maintain critical thinking. But then the other side.
The other side argues that dismissing everything as hoax or misinterpretation ignores the sheer volume and consistency of the reported phenomena across vastly different contexts and families. They point to the genuine terror and suffering experienced by the families involved people who often had nothing to gain and much to lose by coming forward.
Yeah, the stigma alone.
Exactly. Believers emphasize the corroborating details, like the Bill Wilkins confirmation in Enfield or the police reports. They argue the Warrens weren't charlatans, but maybe pioneers tackling a reality, a spiritual reality, that science isn't equipped to measure yet. That they were uncovering truths about darker forces that maybe we as a society are just too afraid or too materialistic to confront. That they were performing a necessary, if dangerous, service.
So two very different interpretations of the same legacy. Exaggeration versus uncovering forbidden knowledge.
Pretty much. But here's the thing.
What?
Whichever side you lean towards, skeptic, believer, somewhere in between, one thing feels undeniable. The real horrors that sparked the Conjuring Universe. They weren't entirely fiction. They didn't just spring fully formed from a screenwriter's imagination.
Right. They were rooted in something real.
They were inspired by genuine human experiences.
Yeah.
Experiences of fear, of suffering, of encountering things that seem to defy logic, defy science, and sometimes, honestly, seem to push people to the very edge of their sanity. Whether the cause was supernatural demons or profound psychological distress, the terror felt by those families was absolutely real. The films tap into that raw fear.
These weren't just spooky tales told around a campfire. They were accounts of things that shattered families' sense of safety, sometimes their lives. The movies are entertainment, sure, but knowing that real pain and fear underpin them, it adds a whole other layer of chill, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
So, maybe the next time you find yourself rewatching The Conjuring or any of its spin-offs, take a moment. Remember the Perrons, the Hodgsons, Donna the nurse, Arne Johnson. Remember that behind the jump scares and the special effects, there were real people grappling with experiences that terrified them to their core. It wasn't just a movie, in a way. It was a warning. A warning, perhaps, about the darkness that might exist, not just on screen, but maybe just out of sight, in the corners of our own world. Something to think about next time the lights go out.